intro. First of all, what is Startup Grind? Startup Grind is the first, actually the one biggest startup community in the world. It connects 2 million entrepreneurs. It's around 125 cities. Try to organize each month event here in Chișinău. So next one will be November, 5 or 6 November, so stay tuned. Next one, this is the agenda. We're going to have a fireside chat with Jon and Sergio. About us, we are already here from 2016 in Chișinău. As a program in Chișinău, we have made 31 events as a background. Also, we have a sleep event called where you can ask questions online if you're shy. So yeah, this is the code. You have the possibility to see more about it. This is our values, what we do as a program actually. So we make friends, not contacts. We help others before helping ourselves. Like we do a dream ups. We believe in giving, not taking. So now I will invite a special guest here from United States Embassy who will give a speech here. Yeah.
My name is Jon. Sunt adresată cultural a Ambasadei Statelor Unite în Moldova și este o mare plăcere pentru mine să fiu aici cu dumneavoastră. I'm going to continue in English because it's not a speech, it's going to be very short. Thank you all for being here. Thank you to our speaker for being here. This is an important topic for us, for you, for our relationship, and I'm really proud that we had the chance to sponsor it. His words, his ideas are way more interesting than mine, so I'm going to stop there and say have a very good evening, and thank you. It's a thrill to see so many of you here tonight. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. We have some topics also special for us. We want to thank Entrepreneurship Academy and Ministerul Educației Tineretului și Cercetării. One, two. Okay. So also thanks, Monet. We want to thanks here also Artco. They have the leech probably. So yeah. Now I'll invite my colleague from the team, Daniela. She will do some trick review.
I'm not a special to be on the stage, but I just wanted to, before we start, I just wanted to have a little warm up with you. Because I've noticed that since I got involved in the startup scene here in Moldova that people in Moldova are shy when it comes to networking. Do you agree with me? Are we good at that? Are we bad at that? Okay. I just want to do something with you to warm you up and kind of have ice breaking. So here's what I want to do. I'll give you 1 minute. You turn to a person in the room that you don't know, not to your friend, close to you, and you just tell one thing that you can be helpful with. Or you tell them what do you do, what services you can offer, what you can be helpful with. So I think this will be a great way to understand the people you have around. Who knows what connection, relationship you build, and what collaboration you build. So I'll just set my timer. Oh, you can start.
If you hear me, clap one time. If you hear me, clap 2 times. Nice. Okay, thanks.
Okay, now I'll just want to not waste any time and welcome our speaker. And the way we do it at Start with Brian, usually we stand up and we welcome him as a rock star. We just clap and we invite you, Jon, on the stage, and also Sergio, who is going to be hosting the chat. Yeah, please both welcome on the stage.
How are you?
Great. In Moldova.
Is it your first time, right?
First time here. Yes.
Well, what did you like so far?
Oh my gosh. Okay, so what have I done so far? I am one of the luckiest guys I know. The people who have welcomed me to Moldova have been phenomenal. I said I'm a foodie, so I want to try all the great food here. I said I'm in the wine business, I want to try great wine. I said I want to see cool sights, I want to meet great people, and we've been doing all of that. And I've only been here 60 hours. So.
What was weird? Just curious, what was weird or kind of different here than elsewhere in the world you have been?
I've been to about 100 countries, probably. So I do have some perspective. There's a lot of interesting things that I'm noticing as I walk down the streets and meet people. I don't know, this morning at McDonald's, the guy would not let me take a picture of the McDonald's. No idea why. Okay. People here do not honk very much. Kind of nice, I have to say. It's actually, I grew up in Nebraska, in Omaha, Nebraska, which is kind of a farming community. And the feeling of this city, which is almost feels like a town to me compared to San Francisco, where I live part of the time, it's lovely. I mean, I can see the quality of life here being quite high from that perspective.
So you moved to San Francisco, you started at Stanford. How your career started as an investor? Maybe you can tell us more about your background. What did you do? What kind of investments you did?
Sure. So, I went to Stanford because it was about the furthest away from my family I could get. And that was my goal as an 18-year-old, was to go see the world. I was always interested in seeing different places. And Stanford has kind of become Stanford. I mean, it was a fine school then, but I think with Silicon Valley ascending, Stanford has become more famous. So back then, I'm kind of a dinosaur, back then, it didn't have the same reputation around technology and Silicon Valley. It was there, but no one knew what venture capital was. But I was one of those guys that would read every entrepreneur and business magazine you could read. Forbes, Fortune, Inc., Entrepreneur. Literally, I would go to the library and just go through these and, oh, that sounds interesting. That guy's cool. That woman's doing interesting things, right? And I would do this for hours and hours and hours, thinking about what is it that I really, really want to do. The one thing I knew I wanted to do was not be in a big company. So I always knew that I wanted to be, not necessarily a startup, there weren't startups per se, but I didn't want to be in a big company. I wanted to either start something or be in a smaller company. My family had some history in real estate, and I thought I was going to do that. But there was a classmate of mine from Stanford who was at Microsoft at the time, and he said, you know what, come see Seattle, you've never been there, it's a free plane ride, and as you know, for a free plane ride, I'll do about anything. So I went up to Seattle, and I interviewed at Microsoft, and it was a couple thousand people, and it was the most interesting set of interviews I'd ever had in my life. They were hard, they were challenging, they were interesting, and at the end of it, they offered me a job, and I thought, I can't believe I'm going to go work for a company, but there are really smart people here. And what I thought about was that this was an opportunity, no matter if I only stayed for 6 months or a year, that I will learn a lot because the people over there were so smart. And so that got me to Seattle, that got me into tech. But at the time, when I went up to Seattle, I knew that I didn't want to work for a big company. And even though Microsoft at the time wasn't that big, I always knew I was going to do something with a smaller company. And I learned about venture capital, and I'd always thought I wanted to do that. So it was a perfect platform. So I got very lucky in some sense because it was the perfect platform for me to go off and start my venture capital career.
So it was Microsoft.
So then you started to.
And you started to invest after Microsoft? Was it?
Yeah. So let me. I'm gonna take this off. It's hot.
What year? Like.
You're gonna ask me my age.
Mics are weird.
So that was in 1994. Can you imagine? And I actually left Microsoft and I went to a startup. So imagine this: in 1994, I went to what was arguably the first venture-funded virtual reality company. In 1994. We raised $50 million. It was unheard of. And the product never really worked. It actually used to give people headaches, and people still today complain about this, right? So it's interesting. But I did marketing at Microsoft. I left there. I was the head of marketing for this company. I got my startup fix, and after that, what I started doing is looking at startup deals and taking them to friends and saying, I would like you to think about investing in this alongside me. And I put the deal together. So one deal at a time, right? And after I did this for about 6 deals, people said, stop bugging us, right? Just go do a fund, right? Yeah, and so I started a fund, and then I raised another fund, and then I raised another fund, and so I did 3 venture funds. And my whole unique point of view on that was I was connecting Seattle and San Francisco. And at the time, I know this sounds strange now, at the time, everybody cared about one tech company, Microsoft. So I could say to people, if you'll let me in the deal, if you'll invest in me, I will make sure with my contacts at Microsoft that I will always know what they're doing competitively or how to partner with them. And so I use that unique skill to my advantage with startups and with investors.
So what was the best deal you invested and the one that you passed, and was great, sort of the missed ones?
Well, there's so many. I'm an active investor, let's say. So I have many failures and a couple of successes, thankfully. In venture capital, what you're trying to do is, if you make 10 investments, you expect 7 or 8 of those investments to completely fail, go to 0. And so you have to be comfortable with that, right? It takes a certain tolerance of risk to be comfortable with that. But you hope you get one that will make up many times for all those failures, right? So the story that I always like to tell is that I met Jeff Bezos when he first moved to Seattle. And I went down to meet him in the original warehouse. And it was 3 people there. And I met him, and he seemed like a really smart guy. And, I thought about it, online bookstore, maybe, but a bunch of my friends were putting a little money in, and so I wrote a $10,000 check, and which was a lot of money for me at the time. And I was driving to give him the check, and I drove next to a well-known bookstore in the States called Barnes & Noble. And I looked at Barnes & Noble, and I looked at my check, I stopped my car, and I ripped it up. I never gave it to him. And that check today would be worth $1 billion. So that was a little painful.
It's $1 billion lesson, yeah.
Yeah, it's a good lesson. You know, but
What was the lesson there? What was
Sort of the insight.
Yeah. So what's the lesson? The lesson there was a couple things. I never understood. So what Bezos did. I mean, it's been so long ago that people may not remember this. But what Bezos did was he wasn't starting a bookstore. He was starting an e-commerce revolution, right? And so as e-commerce was starting to roll out, all the media, all the newspapers, everybody who wanted to talk about e-commerce did not have very many places to go to interview people to talk about it. So every time people talked about e-commerce, Jeff was one of the people they spoke to. So the amount of publicity and awareness that he got for free was well beyond anything I could have ever guessed. Okay, right? And the other thing is, it's funny. I said I have a high tolerance for risk. I guess I really had a hard time understanding. Well, there's no way I could have known that they would get into cloud services and they would get into logistics the way they have. And they get, like, all of that's what makes Jeff amazing to me. But I didn't make the leap of saying, bookstores are not going to go away. People love going to bookstores. They want to touch it. They want to feel it, right? And I didn't understand his ability to take that customer obsession that he has and translate to an experience that would be better ultimately than going to that bookstore. Steve Jobs was amazing because he had this ability that he said he could see around the corners. Right? Everyone can see straight ahead. And I think Jeff Bezos can do that. And as a venture capitalist, sometimes you have to be able to see around the corner. I miss it. Sometimes it's just you're missing. Right? You asked me also one more word. But by the way, I want to make a point about Amazon. So people say, gosh, that was $1 billion mistake, right? By the way, if you would put $10,000 in Amazon when they went public, and everybody had an opportunity to do that, that would be worth several $100 million. So you all made the same mistake. I just want to point that out.
Or we didn't have the knowledge or the opportunity.
No, but of course. And that's a lesson here too, which is there's not a one moment in time for this stuff, right? Every time. So I will say this is after that, I did invest in e-commerce many times, and we did great. One of the better successes was a company called Square Trade, which I bet you've never even heard of. But what they did is they created a whole online warranty program for all the electronics that were being sold. And so that was actually a learning from the Amazon experience to then invest in that piece of it, if that makes sense.
Okay, so right now, so how many investments you did so far in your career?
400.
400.
Yeah, that's a lot, people. That is not normal.
So, what was the sort of the learning from the successes? I mean, what did you learn from
Sure.
the successful ones?
Well, I learned
what
from
makes
Bob.
a good? Yeah, right.
I mean, I learned from
What makes a good or a great investment or style in your?
Let me be clear. answer is? I don't have the answer. You know, I have kind of a mental checklist that I go through for all of these. And some people, you know, the question that people always ask is it the market or is it the people? Well, it's both, okay? If you ask the most successful venture fund in the world, which is Sequoia, they would argue it's market. If you don't have a massive market, you're not going to have you can't have a massive company, and I understand that, and I think that's probably right. But I also think it's right that if you're not, I mean, Jeff Bezos is such a rare guy, he made Amazon. Yes, the market was huge. He helped create a massive market. But, you know, there are some people that can make by sheer force, by sheer genius, and make companies work as well. What I'm always looking for, the combination of course, but I'm always looking for how does a story come together? I want a good storyteller. I want someone who can not only sell me, but I know can sell the market, can sell employees, right? And understand and be smart enough to understand when they're wrong. Because the way startups work is they never work in a straight line, right? There will always be pivots. You're always learning. You're always having to adjust, right? The beautiful thing about a startup is you get real-time feedback every single day. And so I'm looking for a team or a person that gets that and knows how to adjust accordingly.
Okay, maybe we can talk about the wine.
I love talking about wine.
So, how did you end up with the wine? I mean, what was the sort of the story there?
Yeah, so I've always gone between starting companies and investing in startups. And I like both. And I'm also a person who is willing to trust my gut and willing to take a chance. So when I left Microsoft, I did venture capital, but I also started a chain of car washes. Pretty random, but I was interested. I didn't think there were enough car washes in Washington where we were, and so I opened up 5 car washes and ran that, not because I thought it would be a great conversation at a cocktail party, but because I thought there was an opportunity in that market to do that. So every year I decide to go visit a new country, in fact, Moldova this year. In 2007, it was Argentina. And Argentina for Americans has a special allure. And it's amazing if I talk to my friends, everyone would say, oh my God, I went to Argentina, Buenos Aires, it's amazing, it's beautiful, it's fun. So I went there, and one of the things I would attribute some success in my life to is networking. Really consciously networking. And when you meet people, make sure you stay in touch with them, and you connect with them, and you add value to them. And so one of the things I always do when I come to a city, a new place, is I'll look up in my Stanford directory, who's there. And it just so happened a business school classmate from Stanford, Argentine, is a great winemaker, and I called up Santiago and I said, hey, I'm coming to town, would you be willing to have a glass of wine? And that was at 10 in the morning. And at 3 in the afternoon, we had had 5 bottles of wine. We had had a barbecue, and we had had a lot of laughs. And I said to him, I love this place. If I bought some land, would you make the wine? And that's how I got into the wine business. I didn't go there thinking I was going to have that conversation or get into the wine business. But it just made sense to me the more I was engaged with him. His wines are spectacular. The place is beautiful. Americans are interested in Argentina. And in my mind, I thought, I can differentiate this product from everything else on the market. And so I took the risk.
And you sell the wine in U.S.?
Yeah, so we make, all the production is done in Argentina, all the bottling is done in Argentina. We ship it to the States, and we're a small winery. We only make 3,000 cases a year, which is quite small. One of the things that I consciously decided to do was take my background in technology, do lots of social media, marketing, be thoughtful about targeting, and also be very thoughtful about creating a wine club. So trying to take my background and applying it to what is generally considered a non-tech business using technology was kind of my concept.
Tell us more about Wine Club. What is the concept there? And
yeah, one of the things in the United States is in the last few years they've allowed wineries to ship directly to you. So you get a case of wine every 6 months, shows up at your house, at your doorstep, and by doing that, I don't have to give my margin to the retailer or to the wholesaler. And so, as a small winery, if I have to give 50% of the profit away, it's very, very difficult to do it. So my idea was create a connection with people directly and sell them the wine directly so that there's a relationship and that it's a reoccurring shipment.
basically, I subscribe to the club and I receive every
6 months. I mean, different models out there, 3 months, 6 months. But the idea of what is software as a service taught us,
Yeah.
what recurring revenue,
Yeah.
right? And that's kind of what we're trying to do with our wine club.
Interesting. Let's take some questions from the audience. I mean, people were asking on Slido. Maybe the first one, what is the biggest problem you have noticed since arriving in Moldova, and do you have a solution to solve it?
I'm only laughing because that's a big question. Number one, number two, I'm not sure I'm an authority after 60 hours in Moldova to answer it. What I have noticed is I feel that a few people I've met are generally a little bit pessimistic and not as what I'm used to in San Francisco and Seattle are people failing and feeling okay about failing because they just get back and do it again. And our ecosystem doesn't, it actually rewards failure. If you learn from it and you had good ideas and you can leverage off that to do the next thing, like you were talking with some of my experience. I think that really is a culture. That's a mindset. And I think it's extremely important for a successful startup community to have that. So that would be the one thing that I've noticed, and I'd love to explore that more with people and get a sense of if that's.
What is the solution? How do we take failure as a learning and as just a stage of every startup, every part of life? Just how do we solve this? Where people are afraid to start because they think they'll fail, or they're failing and then they're not starting again.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's one simple answer to this. For one thing, if you're really serious about getting into a startup, a couple things I would suggest. Find mentors, find people that can be your personal board of advisors to support you. By the way, doing startups and being an entrepreneur is really hard. I want to be clear on it. It's not for the faint of heart. So it's a marathon. So you have to be committed to it, number one. But getting people around you that are supportive and can give you advice is super important. But as a culture, every day I read, I get up in the morning and I read this thing called Tech Me, and it talks about successes and failures in the startup world. And so for me, I've almost normalized. It's almost normal to me to hear about ups and downs, and you literally have to kind of create your own mind around that as the norm. At the beginning, it's hard though. I mean, in a culture where you don't have people investing and failing, then I would almost say try and find a place you can go. I mean, I have met people here who have gone to London, who have gone to the States, and I think if you're grateful not everyone can do that, I understand. If you can do that, do it. If you can go find a company that you believe is best practices, right? I got very lucky because I went to Microsoft. I literally didn't know it was going to be Microsoft, but I knew there were really smart people there who would drive me. And so, to the extent that you can create your world where there's an energy, I would almost call it an energy. There's a little bit of a heaviness that I feel in Moldova around being successful, around taking risks. And one of the things I would say is immerse yourself in this world. Today, more than any other time in the history of the world, you have all kinds of opportunities. You don't have to wait for someone to come here and sit on the stage and give this talk, right? I just watched the Netflix special on Bill Gates. I mean, I have watched 3 movies. I've watched 3 movies on Steve Jobs. And you go like, why would you do that? And you're already in that world. I would say to you, why aren't you doing that? Right? I listen to podcasts every single day on venture and startups and business ideas, right? Because you have to constantly renew and refresh, right? And if you don't do that, then you kind of get stuck like, I call it the Eeyore syndrome. If you remember Winnie the Pooh, every day it's gonna rain, right? You gotta kind of get out of that. And so that's what I would say.
In what types of business are you interested to invest? For example, wine, fintech, media, digital, e-commerce.
So I would like to say this. There has never been a more interesting time in the startup world or in technology. When I started doing venture, there was one technology, then there was another technology platform. There were major trends. So there were supercomputers, then there were mini computers, then there were personal computers, then there were networks, and then there was the internet. But they happened one after the other. Today, we have 10 absolutely change the world kind of technologies, whether it's AI or data or blockchain, literally there's 10, if not more. And every single one of those are going to offer massive disruption and massive opportunity. So I always thought to myself, I've always thought, get in front of some of those. So I think about the world, I don't have one expertise. There's sort of 2 types of investors. Those that say, I'm only going to do blockchain, I'm going to know it really well, I'm going to know everybody in the space. And then there's more of the opportunistic generalist. I'm more of the generalist. And at this point in my life, I do a lot with people I know. That's really, really important to me, and especially people who have done it before. There is a pretty strong correlation as you think about people you might work with of finding people that have been successful before. They are often successful again. There's something about them that figured it out. There's a pattern recognition there.
So what is the most important question that you are asking when you want to invest in a company?
Yeah, so I talked a little bit about this. The most important question is about the storytelling. But I want to know, as an investor, when someone approaches me and asks me for money, I start the conversation in my head saying no. And you have to overcome that no. And it's not like a little bit of overcome. You have to overcome. I look at thousands of companies and invest in very, very few. So the moment I start to go, then I'm kind of mentally checking out. I'm saying, most venture capitalists are always very polite, and they'll always say, very interesting idea, let me know when you make some more traction. But I'm always a little more honest than that, and I'll let people know exactly, but it's a series of things. I want to know everything from how you did in school. I want to know what your childhood was like. Why do you want to be an entrepreneur? Why is this important to you? What if you fail? But I also want to know, obviously, things about why did you put the financials together the way you did? Why did you put this team together? Who is your team? Have you asked your friends and families to invest? And have they or haven't they? Because they know you way better than I do, probably. And that's always a red flag to me when people come to me and say, well, you know, I haven't met you before. None of my friends and families or colleagues I've worked with before are investing, but would you give me some money? I'm like, no. Why would I do that if people that know you aren't giving you investment dollars? So those are some of the things I think about.
Interesting. And let's say I'm in Moldova. It's from reality here.
Yeah.
So what are my chances to get some investment or maybe not get investment? What would you suggest like a startup do here? I mean, just self-fund all the way? I mean, should they play this game of VC money? What is...
Yeah.
I mean,
So it's very hard. I'll be very upfront. It would be very hard for you in Moldova today to get a venture capitalist, a professional venture capitalist to invest. It's hard for a bunch of reasons. There's not a lot of ecosystem is not built out yet. There's not a lot of examples of successful companies yet. There is the rules and the laws and the regulations are not too friendly yet, right? It's not set up for that. And so, when I said I start a conversation in my mind saying no, those are already red flags for me. So for people here, what I want to say is, you have to be scrappier than scrappy. You have to do things it's quite hard, right? But I want you to bootstrap it, and here's the thing you have to do. You have to get enough traction to show someone this is actually gaining acceptance. This is working. This is going to make money because you can see that we already have 10,000 customers or downloads or whatever your product happens to be. You can't do a back of the, come in and say, hey, I put this business plan together on the back of an envelope, will you give me money? Right? You can't do that. There are very few people who can do that, but especially here. So I would say, try and be as scrappy as possible to show proof points, to show that it is working in some way.
Basically, don't look for money. Get money from the customers, basically self-fund, bootstrap, be scrappy.
That's right.
Once you get to a point, look for outside capital if you want to scale. But why would I need someone money if I'm making already money? I mean, what is the point of this VC? Why would somebody look for VCs? I mean, why?
Yeah. So, to be clear, I often get approached by people who don't have companies that really should have venture money. They're nice businesses, right? The person can take home a nice salary every year. But for me as a venture capitalist, I'm looking to invest in companies where the investment can take the company from here and zoom, right? Where we can grow 100% a year for the next 5 years.
100% on revenue. Like basically top revenue, 100% every year.
I'm just using a number, right? But the general venture heuristic, the general thing you see pitch after pitch after pitch of people who get it is they generally say we're going to be a $50 million company by year 6.
It's mainly software business.
Yeah,
Gross
that's what I'm
margins.
saying. Yeah, right, of course, yeah. So that's the kind of, if you're telling me you're going to be, in 5 years, $1 million company, that's not a venture deal. It could be a great company, don't get me wrong, but it's not going to be a venture deal.
Why 50 million? Because it becomes interesting for somebody to acquire or to go IPO. Basically, you have an implementation event at a certain point, and for an investor, that's the game you're playing.
That's right, because as a venture person, I'm looking to somehow find liquidity, have an exit in 7, 8, 9 years so that I can get the payoff so I can continue to invest.
Okay. Maybe if somebody has questions, you could raise hands. Maybe we can have lights also in the room, so if you don't use light, I can give you the mic.
It's the shy group. Is that right?
Yeah, we are very shy here. Sorry.
You said you read you said you were reading something about failures. What is it? Where do you read it? I mean, what's the information?
Maybe you can see the podcast.
Yeah, so if you do a search online, literally say the best podcasts on venture capital or the best podcasts on startups, you'll get 5. And I listen to all of them. Not every episode, but Reid Hoffman has one. There's one called Acquired. There's TechMeme does one. There's a lot. I mean, literally, come up to me afterwards. I'll show you my phone, and you can see my library. There are 50 podcasts. So yeah, there's a bunch, and they're easy to find. And by the way, there's a bunch of great stuff on YouTube. Really great stuff on YouTube.
Hi, John. Thank you so much for the intro. How much does the politics of the country influence your decisions to invest in a company and location?
A lot. As you know, the United States is quite capitalist and quite friendly to business formation. The politics don't get in the way. They generally are trying to pave the path, right, they want us to succeed, right? And so the politics, if there's not a good regulatory environment, I give you an example. In Seattle, we have, the city is blowing up. It's being transformed. Amazon is there, Google's adding more people, and Facebook is adding more people, Apple is adding more. So they're doing it because it's cheaper to live there, it's a beautiful place, it's close enough to Silicon Valley, but we don't have enough software engineers for all these companies moving in, right? So in the last 5 years, the government has helped fund so that there are double the number of engineers coming out of the universities. That's that's an active way that politics is helping the ecosystem, if that makes sense.
Yes, it does. Thank you. And do you have any examples of other countries where you put your money besides US and Argentina? Like some
Yeah, it's a
successful
good
stories?
question.
Startups coming from other countries.
Yeah, so there's actually a fair number of startups coming to the U.S. I think most VC, so you have to understand, when I make an investment in a company, I want to talk to them on a regular basis. I want to go to the office. I want to be able to use my connections to help with customers or hiring. If someone from Moldova, if I invest here, I'm not going to be very helpful. And that doesn't, part of what I want to do when I'm investing is what we call be value add value to the investment. Because I think hopefully I can help with the process of growth. And I just can't, if it's not in Seattle or San Francisco or in one of my networks, it's pretty tough to do that.
Hi, my name is Anna, and I'm a psychologist. I was wondering, from your experience as an entrepreneur, probably you went through several emotional roller coasters. If you've been in therapy or coaching and wondering, what do you think about it? What helped you build the resilience?
Well, it's an interesting question. As I said to you, the startup adventure can be very brutal, and this is going to sound extreme, and I'm just giving you a couple examples, but I've had a couple of friends who have actually decided life wasn't worth living. Now, it wasn't just because of the startup, but it can be a very lonely place, and I do think, when I work with founders, one of the things that I really try hard to make sure that they are surrounded by support, and that could be mentoring, that could be therapy, but it's otherwise extremely lonely. And most founders have no one they can really talk to be honest about what's working and what's not working. You always kind of have to paint this picture like, yeah, so it's a real issue, and I'm glad you brought it up.
So is there anything you're doing on a daily basis, meditation, yoga? From your experience?
Yeah, I do. I use Headspace every day and have for about 3.5 years now. I don't know if you know that app.
Yeah, it's a
Headspace.
cool one. It's one of the best.
It's great, and it has been extremely helpful. I mean, it probably took me 6 months to actually develop a practice, but I couldn't recommend it more. It doesn't have to be that one. There's lots of them, but it's just 15 minutes a day, and it becomes a very valuable 15 minutes to me every day.
Thank you.
Did you see the deal of Headspace to invest your proposal?
I did not. It was out of LA. I didn't see it yet. Actually, Calm, I think, got $1 billion valuation.
I think it's also $1 billion, yeah.
Maybe we'll take some questions from here. At what stage of the startup life do you usually invest? Early seed? Yeah.
Yeah, so again, I am not your typical investor. I'm willing to do very early to later and have done them all. Most funds, formal funds, generally will state whether they're earlier stage, later stage, because they're out selling a story. As someone who's more of an individual at this point, I have the luxury or freedom to do what I want. I am helping raise a new fund right now, which I think I just want to talk about because I think it's so interesting. I've been doing venture for 30 years, and there hasn't been a lot of change in approach with venture. I mean, the biggest probably change in the last 10 years is there's a lot more what are called seed funds. Seed funds are these funds that will go really early, put a small amount in, and try and write out and give it to the bigger funds, okay? The fund that I'm working with is fundamentally changing the approach to venture by using data to identify companies around the world to invest in. So the way most venture funds work is you guys call and you say, I've got this idea, I want to come in and pitch you, or there are demo days, but these guys don't have anybody coming in. They're looking at 40 terabytes of data. They teach data science at Stanford. So they're actually doing the work behind the scene and then calling companies and saying, we think what you're doing is really interesting. And often they are calling companies that aren't even raising money, and they're surprised they've been found. So they're often the first money in, and they're doing it on a global basis. Because what's interesting, and I will say this is one of the positives for Moldova, is that venture is no longer just about San Francisco, no longer just about Silicon Valley. Startups can happen everywhere. Africa just had its first $1 billion IPO, Jumia, e-commerce company, for example. Mexico, India, I mean, right? So the great news is it's never been easier to start a company from an infrastructure standpoint, right? And so I think more and more people are going to start looking globally, and so that's a positive trend for Europe and other places.
So basically, if I'm Moldova again, I need to kind of bootstrap, self-fund,
Yeah,
find a good market, like a big market,
right.
great team, get to a point, and then move the company in US
Yeah.
to get access to that capital. If I'm pursuing this game of
That's
venture
right.
capital.
That's right. I mean, one of the things about going to a venture capitalist is, believe me, there's lots of mistakes venture capitalists make. But if you have gone to 15 venture capitalists and nobody wants to give you money, it does force you to kind of ask yourself, well, is my business a good business for venture capital? Right? At least that the process of feedback can be very useful.
It's kind of going through this route and okay,
Yes.
Yeah. We talked about problems in Moldova. Let's talk about opportunities. So, in your kind of short time here, did you see any opportunities, any kind of positive things?
Well, you know, what I would say is I think about Argentina a little bit when I think about Moldova. So Argentina, there is actually one unicorn there called Mercado Libre, but Mercado Libre, there's a bunch of Stanford guys, 4, and what they did is they basically copied eBay and made eBay for Latin America, right? And now they've done a bunch of other things since then. So if I'm an entrepreneur here, I would definitely, again, I get back to the podcast, I would be looking at business models that are working in other areas and ask, are they appropriate for this region?
For this region, exactly. Because not for this country, it's just a small market.
No, right, I mean, for sure. For the region, which I'll go to Argentina. Argentina is only 30 million people here too.
Oh, I see.
So they would then figure out how do we sell to Mexico and Brazil and Chile and Peru. And
So it's the same language, Spanish. So basically, if I'm here, I'll be
That's
looking
right.
for Russian-speaking or Romanian-speaking.
Right, exactly.
Because if it works in U.S. or maybe other different countries, the chances for that idea to work is very
And
high.
you can, and by the way, you can copy, I'll just say, you can copy or imitate, whatever you want to say, because they've learned a lot to be successful in that market.
I think we have one more or 2 more questions. Do we? Okay, we have some time. So that's a red question. I don't know what does it mean. Can you tell a situation when you saved an investment from crash?
Yeah, I mean, by the time that I have figured out that an investment is not working, it's often too late. So what I try and do is be, again, in contact with the founders and the CEO on a regular basis so that doesn't happen. What you generally are doing, I have a company right now that is, it has pivoted, it has tried different pay models, revenue models, and it just can't, and yet it's in a huge space, and the CEO is very seasoned. So, we were out of money a year and a half ago, and I basically thought of everybody I could to take Kevin, the CEO, to and say, will you look at this deal? And it should have been closed, but I found a venture fund that shared our vision, and literally at the last minute wrote a $2 million check. But these are scary times. You're on fumes. You're having to lay people off. You're moving to a smaller space. Again, I go back to it can be very, very tough. But the thing you have to do is, and we have this conversation a lot, is to always say, how much money do you have? How much runway do you have? When are you going to run out of money? Where are we spending the money? Is it appropriate? Balancing between sales and your own ops, right? So it's sort of a constant. In some sense, we're always saving it from crashing.
So basically, as Reid Hoffman, I think, was saying, an entrepreneur is someone that falls off a cliff, and on the way back to when the falling is assembling an airplane.
That's a great way to
Basically,
put
you're
it.
falling all the time in the
That's right.
startup.
That's right.
Got it. So maybe one more question. I wanted to talk about the future. Where do you see sort of all of this going? I mean, you're living there, you're living in this environment. I mean, we're living in this part of the world, in Europe. I mean, because in Silicon Valley, I mean, that's where the future is built sometimes, or I should say a lot of times there. So what do you see there happening that we can learn from here, or people here can sort of learn from?
Well, I think there is a lot of interesting discussions going on. I think one of the big ones is the whole automation discussion. Automation around what's the future of work? Right? will there be jobs? I mean, literally, there isn't an industry where people aren't being replaced. I mean, there's doctors. I can think of startups getting rid of some doctor activities, lawyer activities, driving, obviously, with self-driving cars and Uber, drone deliveries, right? So what does that mean? There are plenty of people who would say it's going to just create a bunch more jobs. There are plenty of people who would say, no, we're actually going to have a bunch of leisure time, and how are we going to manage that? And people are even talking about how maybe we should just give a check to everyone every month, and we should figure out what that looks like. So that's a huge discussion. I think there's a huge discussion on, obviously, privacy. You guys know something about that in this part of the world, but even more with the Alexas in your house and more cameras, and what does that mean? And what's it mean to have more information about health is a fascinating area, right? My guess is that we will look back today in 20 years and can't believe how blunt our instruments were for solving health issues. The whole notion of personalized medicine is completely blowing up and super interesting. So again, you heard me say, I feel like there's not one tidal wave coming, there's 10 tidal waves coming. And there's never been a more interesting, I honestly feel like this is the moment. This is absolutely the most interesting moment in human history around the world changing. And by the way, not all good. I recognize that. There's a bunch of, but not all good means there's a bunch of opportunities too.
I think on that note we can end the speech, and if you want to talk with Jon in person or network, we'll have another 30 minutes. You mentioned that?
Yeah.
Do we have more time for questions?
Well, actually, so one of the things that I find interesting about venture capital is the return curve on that, and how many startups they have to invest in, and what is the actual return. So obviously there's one company that is like crazy, like Amazon, which gives you like 100,000 times your money back. But then, for you, what is an interesting return on an investment, and how do you look at that holistically? A lot of times when you invest, if you invest small amounts in a lot of things, the one that takes off, doesn't get a big return. But of course, if you go really big on one thing, that can basically, you don't have to ever invest again, right? So how do you?
How do I think about that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think as I've done this for some time now, I was pretty happy previously trying to get returns that would be, I'll call them singles and doubles, to use a baseball analogy, a couple times, 3 times, 4 times. I think at this point in my life, I am looking for at least 10 or more X return. Otherwise, I have other ways to, I'm not exactly in what I'll call preservation mode, but if I'm going to spend the time, at this point, time is my scarce resource, and so I want to be involved. And by the way, the company that returns at 2 or 3x can be a fine, interesting company, but I get way more excited, and I know the risk reward is there, so it can fail too. But I think that for me now, I am actually trying to think about how is it going to change the world a little bit. It's no longer just I want to create an interesting company with a nice return. I'm really thinking about how is this team, how is this company going to change the world. That's what I'm starting to think. So it's not just a multiple. It's other things that interest me in some of these investments as well.
I think that's it. Thank you, Jon. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, our sponsors. Thank you, Daniela, Dream, and the team. We're not going anywhere. We have networking, and there's
We have
something more.
Some more work for you to do. Well, now, I guess we have people who have a business idea What we usually do is start a grind. We have 3, 4, 5 people in the audience to come on the stage and do a 1-minute pitch. It can be a startup pitch, it can be maybe you're looking to hire somebody, maybe you're offering an interesting service, and you have the opportunity to come and speak up. And I will start actually. I've got 2 things to pitch to you. The first one is we are organizing a hackathon on Smart Sustainable City, which you are welcome to join if you'd like to make a positive impact on the city and work on solutions, eco-solutions, and develop a sustainable Chișinău. And the second one is the App Factory Accelerator that we launched. It's an online acceleration program that we run. So if you are starting at the early stage or you're on an idea stage and you'd like our help, the help of our mentors, please apply. We also have a few scholarships right now, thanks to our partners from FC Entrepreneurship Academy, so you can benefit of one. So that's us. Who wants to come up on the stage and have a 1-minute fame? Wow. So we got no startups in the room. Crawlers. I think you might need some sales or customers or.
Actually, because I did not want to come on first. So I'm Andre, CEO and co-founder of Crawlers. So basically what we do is help different companies who have repetitive tasks at work to automate them and basically allow them to focus on company's growth and then scaling the company to heights that nobody imagined possible. So basically what Crawlers does is taking any repetitive work that you have and basically mimicking all of the human interactions in a web browser. So if you have some use cases or examples, then that would be some, I don't know, invoice generation or collecting data from internet or generating reports daily, monthly, weekly, and so on and so forth. So the use cases where repetitive tasks at work exist, and you as the executive of the company, you are responsible to actually diving into the process of the company and find what things you can automate so that your business grows. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wants to share anything with us?
Hi everyone, my name is Anna. Every 13 seconds in the world there is a breakup. Breakup is one of the most stressful situations we can go through. On the first being the death of a loved one. For those who went through a breakup, they know that they are in very deep emotional pain. It's the loss of a lot of plans regarding the other person. Often we lose appetite, our sleep, and the sense for living. That's why me and my team came up with an idea. It's a chatbot called XChat, which helps people go through a breakup and offers 21 first day support, of emotional support. It's a way of, it's basically a personal development plan, and we are looking for people who are interested to try out our MVP. You can try it out on Facebook. It's called XChat Beta, and basically you sign up, do the subscription, and you can receive a 21st day of emotional support. So if you know friends who are going for a breakup, recommend them XChat so they will get free of their ex. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, I see people are getting quite relaxed over there. So we've got 1 more hour of networking. We have pizza, we have wine, thanks to Average Wine. And thank you again to our partners, Orange, FC Entrepreneurship Academy, the US Embassy, Mobiles Banca. Thank you for supporting us, and enjoy the evening. We've got some more time for network, create connections, friends, and hopefully some useful collaborations. Thank you all for coming.